Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Great Art Adventure. This week I want to show you another portrait, but this time it's a portrait with a bit of a twist, and something with a little bit more of a story and a narrative to it. Enjoy. I've been living in country Victoria now for the last 3 years, and I'm becoming more and more influenced by the scenes that are surrounding me. And I'm really interested in the moment at the relationship between people and animals, in particular the domestic animals that occupy these rural settings. There is a wealth of inspiration in this corner of Australia. Everywhere I turn, I'm finding new ideas for painting. This is going to be a painting of a very different kind. I want to do something that I've never done before. I'm thinking about how I can take all of these elements, from the landscape to people to animals, and bring them together in one image. All whilst building a narrative highlighting the connection between a man and his horse. I've wanted to paint horses for years and create something that captured their gentle nature and incorporate this somehow into a portrait. So the idea central to this image is this guy's been out working on the field all day and he's trying to perform a particular task and the horse is just not cooperating. And I've got to find the right model and the right horse and set up the right scenario in reality in order to photograph and film this to see if I can capture and touch on that idea. So for the subject of this painting, I'm going to use a friend of mine who lives nearby. He's got exactly the right look for this painting. Meet my friend Ollie, who's a local artist here in Daylesford. Ollie's got a real distinct character and a sincere demeanor which is perfect for this painting. So we're out here at a local property where there's plenty of horses for us to interact with, so we can find the right one for this painting. Tom Tom might just have what it takes. He's an older horse with a great character, and I thought the contrast of Tom Tom against Ollie's jacket might make an engaging composition. I get Ollie and Tom Tom to walk around the stables in circles to capture different kinds of light. And already he's getting into the spirit. What I'm after are a series of still images that I might be able to work from in the studio, capturing different angles of Ollie and different light on the horse. One of these images may work, but I feel like something's missing, and we decide to go out into the open field and try it again. I get a bit more distance from my subject to reduce camera distortion. I get Ollie to keep walking around me to get some different light angles, and perhaps one of these might present an opportunity. Tom Tom's been really cooperative, but at this stage he's probably had enough. Color's really important, as is contrast, so I decide to try another horse that might be able to provide a little bit of a darker tone within the painting. I get Ollie to walk around with another horse, Harry, in a similar fashion to before, to see if maybe another opportunity would present itself. Harry's got a really independent nature, which I think is going to make him the perfect character for this painting. In my initial inspiration of this idea, I was thinking I'd have a backlit scenario, and some of these photos will work really well as inspiration for the final painting. Dozens of images later, and I think I've stumbled across the right picture that is going to help me with this painting in the studio. I set out with a firm idea in mind, and this photo closely matches that initial concept. So now that I've collected some reference material that's really going to help me along in the painting process, I'm just going to sketch out my idea first to make sure I'm on the right track. I'm sketching directly onto a sheet of pre-primed linen that's been taped to a board. Working directly from my reference material, I sketch in the main lines of the composition, using burnt umber and a bit of medium. I always start my paintings pretty loose and then refine the image as I go along. When I'm painting landscapes or seascapes, I'll begin with the furthest zones first, but here I decide to start with my darkest tone, a combination of ultramarine blue and burnt umber. I keep my sky combination pretty simple. This is cobalt teal with titanium white, ultramarine blue, and a touch of quinacridone magenta. Once my image has been blocked in totally, I just make sure there's no ridge lines that are sticking up. I brush all of these loose brush marks out to soften the image before refining it further. Generally, I sketch out my composition first before ever attempting the bigger painting. This allows me to really work out my thought process and everything that goes into the final composition. We all have 20/20 vision and hindsight, and my thinking is, what if we painted with hindsight? It may seem laborious, but I believe this helps us get to a better result within our studio practice. I'm going to keep this sketch reasonably loose and free, and save all of that detail for the final painting. All I'm looking for is an indication of where my final composition is going to go. I'm pretty happy with this as a compositional study for the final painting, although I am relying pretty heavily on my reference photograph. I'm curious to see where the final painting is going to go and how it's going to relate to this initial sketch. Now that I'm finished with my sketch and I'm really happy with the way it came out, I'm ready to get on with a bigger version of this painting. I'm working on a Belgian linen stretcher. This time I've pre-primed my linen with burnt umber and ultramarine to make a really dark background color. I'm looking for a tonal contrast right from the outset. I'm sketching in my composition freehand, using a combination of titanium white and quinacridone magenta and oleogel as medium. I'm judging one shape against another just by feel and eyeballing my way along. Now I begin with my sky, and you can see right away there's an enormous tonal contrast between the titanium white and ultramarine blue combination of the sky behind. With some variation in my blues, I introduce a little bit of cobalt teal, and quinacridone magenta, and then add a little bit of burnt sienna and yellow oxide as I work into the hills behind. After the landscape has been mostly blocked in, I get to work straight away on the horse. The colors I'm using for Harry are burnt umber and ultramarine blue, with a touch of burnt sienna and yellow oxide. There's titanium white in the nose patch, and a touch more cadmium red in the hair that's been highlighted by the sun. I'm keeping the image relatively simple in the beginning stages of my blocking in, and then I'm going to add finer details as the painting progresses. I'm using a hog bristle dagger, which is an incredibly versatile brush in terms of the marks you can make. This brush is perfect for the different components of the bridle. I keep my skin color combinations really simple by using mainly titanium white, burnt sienna, and burnt umber with a touch of yellow oxide. The hat is very similar in color, but the tone is a little bit deeper here, so I introduce a little bit more ultramarine blue. As I began to work on this painting, I realized that something was missing from my original source material. I decided what I really needed was a bright color note and something to just set the painting off a little bit. So I took a brightly colored scarf, went and saw Ollie again, matched the light angle, and re-photographed Ollie wearing this scarf, as I felt that that bright color would really set this painting off. I want to make this scarf a nice bright red color, something that's going to catch the sun and really set off a bright spark in the painting. This Dryzerbone is going to make a really fantastic feature within the painting and provide lots of texture and interest. A bit of light has made its way past Harry's snout onto the jacket. This is a combination of yellow oxide and titanium white. Generally, I work from a very simple background and then add layers of detail on top in about 3 passes. But this time, I'm going to try and limit it to 2 passes and go straight to detail. After the entire image has been blocked in, I then go back to my background layers and refine the image further and smooth out zones like the sky and the background hills. My combinations get a little bit more complicated, and I add a few new colors. I'm using plenty of yellow oxide still, but now I've introduced some transparent gold oxide to get the yellow out of those hills. The face needs more refinement, and some deeper tones need to be added to add a little bit more of a sculptural component. The shadows are mapped out with a little bit more purple, given by quinacridone magenta and ultramarine blue, and then this is balanced with more titanium white and yellow oxide, and some quinacridone red to add a little bit of a flush to the cheeks. I keep my tones really subdued to allow for the opportunity of some bright highlights against the face. This has got just a touch more titanium white, some yellow oxide, and burnt sienna. I slowly refine the face one mark at a time. It's important not to be in a rush, and just judge each stroke as you lay it down. For my shadows, I'm sticking to an ultramarine burnt umber combination, and I avoid using black. The tones need to be adjusted on the hat as it catches the sunlight, and I've allowed for a little bit more titanium white in this area. I then refine the edge of the brim by using the flat edge of my bristle dagger brush. I increase the tone a little bit more with this hat band and introduce a bit of cobalt teal and titanium white to set it apart from the hat. I'm really excited by the textural contrast within this painting and the variation between the different materials here. Having some good reference for a painting like this is absolutely vital. These are giving me visual cues that are helping me along in the process. Sometimes areas within a painting can sink into the canvas or linen. To freshen these zones up, I just need to apply a thin layer of oleogel with a flat synthetic brush. With an even pattern like this, I mark in with dark shadows first and just get my spacing right. I start to bring out a little bit more detail and increase the complexity with the reins. There are many different elements within this painting, amongst which are some of these metallic objects within the bridle. I'm paying close attention to how this metal object reflects light. I'm hoping by adding all of these different materials and textures that it's going to create a more engaging effect in this painting, and that the viewer is going to be captivated by all of this extra detail. These buckles and straps within the bridle will command attention and allow this area to come forward. I've had some great reference material to work from in this project, which has helped me with all of the components of the bridle and even these crisp highlights in the hair. But therein lies the problem. Because I've had such great reference material, I've relied on it too closely, and I may have lost sight of my original idea.
One of the things that can happen in the process when we have really good photo reference is we can follow it a little bit too closely. That's exactly what's happened to me. I found that as I'm working from these photographs, I've copied them really, really close, and I've gotten further away from what the original idea was. Now that I've identified the problem, I need to go back and fix it. And of course, with oil painting, it's never too late to change something once you realize you've made a mistake. I need to add to the drama of this story. It's just lacking a little bit of punch, and I think that's because of the blue sky that's behind the figure and the horse. So I'm going to add a really heavy thunderstorm behind Ollie and this horse to see if I can add to the story.
I'm using Langridge oleogel, which takes about 4 or 5 days to dry between layers. The sky that I'm working over is now completely dry, and I'm just going to line in where my clouds are going with a synthetic brush. I dropped the tone in this area considerably by mixing some burnt umber with ultramarine blue, and then making it slightly purple with some quinacridone magenta. I can keep my tones balanced by adding varying amounts of titanium white. I'm doing my best to cleanly work around the edge of what I've already established, which is a little bit tricky when I get the order out of sequence like this. Simultaneously, I'm focusing on my form and line so that this cloud will now fit in with my composition. To make sure my sky coordinates with the land, I just bring down a little bit of this sky color into the distant hill and re-establish some brushwork. I was resistant at first, but I'm glad I took the time to revisit this area. I think the painting's working much better as a result. It's time for me to detail the eye, and I refresh this area by brushing in a little bit of oleo gel. I then hit the eye with a little bit of paint, which is primarily titanium white with a touch of ultramarine blue and quinacridone magenta. Then I rework this reflection with a dry brush. Similarly, I refine some of the componentry in the bridle. I make sure that my edges are clearly defined and each one of these leather forms turns in space. This stage in the painting, I start to introduce my darkest darks. Phthalo green, burnt umber, and quinacridone magenta makes a color near lamp black. Another thing that I felt was missing from this painting is an area of really bright color and bright tone. This red scarf caught in sunlight I think will really set off the painting. I've preserved my brightest tone and my most saturated color, cadmium red, for this area. Light is going to be bouncing off the scarf and hitting areas of the bridle as well as the side of the horse's face. This is an effect that didn't really show up in my reference material, but I'll have to reinvent it. The bright light is also going to bounce off the side of the eyeball and really round out the curve in the horse's eye. This has been a pretty interesting project to work on, and I've really loved the different aspects and challenges that have popped up along the way. For me, this is what painting's all about, setting forth with an idea and having an end in mind. Hopefully, with all of the challenges out the way, we end up with a result that closely matches our initial inspiration.
Well, there you have it, guys. That's the end of another project, and I must say I'm quite pleased with the way it turned out, despite the fact I had some trials along the way. Now, if you would like more information on how I paint, or this painting in particular, why not join my mailing list? Simply go to www.andrewtischler.com and subscribe. And this painting of Ollie and the horse is going to be featured in my upcoming release all about painting portraits. So if you subscribe to my list, you'll be amongst the first to know. Thanks for watching, guys, and as always, you can catch me on social media through Facebook or Instagram. We'll see you next time.